Hey, and thanks, guys, for joining us on this edition of the podcast. Today, I've got Barry. Barry doesn't really need an introduction for those of us that have been in the business for a while, but I'm going to let Barry introduce himself, tell you what he does, and then we'll jump into the questions. Go ahead, Barry.
Hey, thanks for having me. I'm Barry Schwartz. In the SEO world, I'm kind of known for reporting on search, Google for the past almost 20 years. I started in 2003 writing about search. In the broader world, I've run a web development company. We build software, both web and mobile applications. So we have some experience there. We've built some SaaS products and so forth. So I'm really excited to be here, and thanks for having me.
Yeah, great. Yeah. Thanks for being on the show. You're definitely a name that came up multiple times. So we wanted to reach out and get some information. A lot of the people in our community, they're just starting out. They're starting an agency either as a marketer or a web designer, but they've just got a lot of questions that they would really like to learn from somebody of your caliber, actually. So I'll jump right into the questions. The first one happens to deal with clients and what kind of red flags potentially, like when you take on a client and you're first talking to them, are there any early warning signs or red flags that you could share as far as like a high maintenance client?
Yeah. So I've been doing this, like I said, like for a while. So I've been running my agency, Rusty Brick, software development company for since the 90s, mid 90s. And sometimes red flags cannot always represent an issue with a client. Like you might think this red flag or that red flag, they hit that, and then you say, you know what, I'm going to work with them anyway. And sometimes they turn out to be a great client. So that's the first caveat. That like sometimes you list red flags and you're like, oh, this is a red flag. Goodbye. It might not always turn out that case. And sometimes the client might seem perfect when you speak to them as a prospect, and they might turn out to be a pretty bad client. So um, it's interesting. Like you want to make sure that one of the things is like you want to make sure like the client when you're speaking to them, the prospect, that they're responsive, but you also don't want them to be too responsive. You don't want them to be too pushy and so forth. Um, some clients also, when they in the prospect mode, they tell you maybe just a high level idea of what they want, and they have no more details. Whereas some of the clients give you like 100-page spec on exactly what they want and how they want it. And there's pros and cons to both. Often the
Sure.
ones that give you very, very little detail, like this is I want to build I want to build an Uber app. That's all they tell you, and
Yeah.
how much it's going to cost. That's usually a huge red flag. They haven't done their homework. They're not really interested. So I'm getting, if I had to list a number of red flags, I'd be like, maybe do they reply to your questions in a timely fashion? Um, are those responses to your questions answering the complete question? Are they skipping questions? Are they we're not really giving you the full details that you're asking for? Is that on purpose? Meaning, are they trying to hide something? Are they being lazy? That type of stuff. Because often with software development, it's you could build something, like they want to build something, but it's all about the details when it comes to building something. And if they're not giving you the details, then we can make up the details ourselves, but it's really your product. um I don't know, like, do they always call you when they're doing something else, like if they're in the car driving, or maybe
Oh,
they have the
yeah.
kids in the background and they're like talking to their kids, and like, oh, kind of like you're like, oh, I have a minute here, but not really. I'll give you some attention here and there. That's kind of annoying. At the same time, it shows maybe they're not giving your full undivided attention.
Exactly.
um do they want to, like, instead of paying you, do they ask, after you give a quote and everything, do they say, can we partner instead? I don't have the money, I want to partner with you, and I think this would be great. It's a great idea, and I'll partner with you. I'll give you my idea, and I'll give you X% in equity in the company. That's sometimes to be a pretty big red flag. A lot of people who have great ideas often don't want to share that equity unless they, some of them have VC funding, and that's different. But partnering with a development company or agency sometimes might be a huge red flag. Um, Also, things like, oh, I need to raise money before,
Oh,
during the process of
yeah.
building it, but I can only raise money until I build it. So I have no money now, but I'll build it. I'll build it with you, and hopefully, once I have something done, I'll be able to pay you because I'm sure I'll raise money, and that's often dangerous. It's not. often you'll get hit with a bill and you're becoming their venture capitalist because you're funding it, but with zero up, zero up with that. Another thing, like, is, if they're leaving another firm to go to you, the question is why? Did that other firm fire them? Did they not like that firm because of other reasons? Like, what are the complaints they have about the other firm? Sometimes it's like, oh, well, they're charging me too much, or maybe they're too neat. There might be 100 reasons why, and you might want to ask them why you're leaving this firm. And a lot of people jump from firm to firm because either maybe it's a bad firm they're with or a bad agency they're with, but you want to kind of dig into those details to see why. So I think those are some red flags. I don't know if you've experienced any of those yourself, but that's what I come up with.
Yeah, a lot of them I didn't even realize would be red flags until you brought them up. Like that was a very good one there at the end about, them switching agencies. Why are they doing that? Like I've never looked at that, but I've definitely experienced some of the other red flags, like, hey, let's partner instead of, me wanting to pay you. I do know that two that I've experienced, one of which was shared on a prior podcast, but the clients that agree to certain terms, like let's say, they agree that they'll pay you net 30, and then net 30 comes and it's net 45, it's net 60, and you're like, hey, where's the payment at? And, they want you to hold up your end of the bargain, but they're not, holding up theirs. And another one, the second one that was shared was, somehow they get your phone number, which I know that a lot of agencies will give out, like the owner will give out the personal phone number to win that business when they're first starting out. But they get your phone number and they text you like all weekend and at late hours of the night. And you find out it's not because they want to get it off their chest, because they might forget about it, but they actually expect you to actually answer them at like 2 a.m. or like on Saturday at 6, so yeah, I definitely like the one about switching agencies. So that's one that I'm going to keep in the back of my mind.
Right. So, I mean, the two you mentioned are kind of like after you already sign them up as a client.
Yeah.
The question is, how could you avoid that with red flags beforehand, I thought? Because once they're a client, and then it's like hard. It's like, all right, you're texting me on the weekend, you already paid X $1,000 with me. How can I not respond? And I don't, most of my clients know to email me if it's an emergency. But you can usually tell from that type of stuff, like those types of red flags that I mentioned before. Are they like kind of like one of those people that just like will call you out of the blue with kids in the background, or with driving their car and a motorcycle with windows open and stuff like that, that type of aspect. But yeah, I agree.
Yeah. The early red flags before they sign the contract or right after, and you're like the first 30 days in. Yeah, both are good examples, good timelines. But that does get me to my next question, which was overbearing clients. So basically, I'm sure you've had your share of clients that were overbearing, very, very demanding. How do you stand your ground? Because I know a lot of people that are just starting out, like they really want to win that service, but they don't want to cross that line of, at what point is it okay for me to say, hey, I don't want your business? No. What have you experienced there?
Yeah, I mean, outside of like being abusive and stuff like that, I mean, the clients can't put my employees in a situation where my employees are not happy. If my employees are becoming unhappy, that's a very big problem for me. Happy employees lead to happy clients. I'm sure you've experienced that. And the happy employees make great products. They will make, it will just make happier clients. And if you have one unhappy employee because of an abusive or too demanding, overbearing client, that will lead to even more unhappy clients and could really, domino in terms of a number of unhappy clients, and then even the employees potentially leaving. So one client can't lead to that. That's like a number one rule of mine. Sometimes you have to have a serious talk with a client and say, I know you might be upset about something or whatever it might be. If you want to take it out on me. I'm the owner. Don't take it out on the employee. and we'll have a conversation about that. It's very rare for that. I think I had that conversation maybe once in my 20 plus, years of doing this. But it happens. Some people are
Yeah.
their leadership role, how they lead their company or how they deal with, people under them is just about yelling and screaming, and that's how they talk to people. So that's number one rule, is making sure that my employees are happy. And if a client makes an employees unhappy, that's going to be a big no-no. That's a grounds for dismissal or getting rid of a client. But some tips to kind of like avoid that from the onset. Obviously, you want to set the expectations early on, make sure the clients know what to expect, when to expect it, and so forth. It's much easier to do that in the development world. Like, you have your specs, often you know what to build. But when it comes to like SEO, you don't really control all the variables. You can't control when Google does algorithm updates. You can't control if a site gets updated based on your audit and so forth. So you can't really control the variables and the outcomes of that, because it's not really in your hands. So it's kind of hard to set as clear expectations as it is with the development world. So I totally understand that. But one thing you might want to do, instead of getting like constant phone calls and text messages from your clients, maybe schedule weekly calls as opposed to like on-demand calls. Those are kind of good things to do. The clients know they can prepare a list of notes throughout the week and say, these are my topics that I want to discuss with you. It might be a to-do list for the future. It might be some demos or maybe some questions, and they could have that all on that 1 hour, 30-minute call that you schedule every Monday or whatever day it might be. Another thing we found that it's sometimes complicated to have multiple employees at a company or at a client's company reach out to you. You probably want to have like generally one point of contact. Depends on the departments. You might have 2 or 3 depending on the different types of things that you build for them or do for them. But you want to have one person or certain select number of people at your client's company that deals with you, so that they're all on the same page. One person is like kind of like the project manager on the client side, or whatever it might be, and that person leads the project with you, so that person's always on the same page, and they could go back to the other stakeholders in that company and kind of deal with them directly, as opposed to you having to deal with them and so forth. Same thing on our side. Like, when you do work for them, you don't want to have them necessarily reach out to every single one of your employees. You want to have like a lead for that, like a project manager or something like that, or account manager. Yeah. So also, like, when it comes to development or releases, like, we like to do. Sometimes some of our clients, they want to do rapid releases of code, like push out new code every day or 10 minutes or whatever it might be. So some larger ones, we might say, it might make sense to put into a staging environment, test it for a week or two, and we'll do releases every Monday or every other Monday or something like that. That kind of also leads to better expectations for the client as well. Maybe you could get them to prioritize all their requests. This way, you know what to work on first, as opposed to them giving you like 4,000 things they want, and then why the items on item number 99 and 98 not done when we did 1 and 2, stuff like that. And then always, like, if you can, always try to go under budget, because when a client gets their bill, they'll be happy to see how much you've done, and it costs less. That's always hard to do, but that's always recommended. And then that kind of leads to clients becoming really happy, even the ones that are kind of like overbearing and stuff. And often that tends to work, where they'll be like, you know what, this conversation we had about these are the tips in terms of weekly calls and code releases and all these types of things, that really leads to a much better outcome for both us and you. And it's just a great overall, relationship.
Yeah, that's great advice, because, definitely, even in my experience, having the expectations set up front as far as, what's a priority. You've got 40 things here, but what's the top priority in a list? Keeping, a weekly cadence as far as like phone calls, so that expectations are set and things are on track, and that problems are addressed at least, weekly as they come up, not random phone calls on a Saturday. So yeah, definitely great advice. That's definitely good. The next question, I kind of laughed at this. I mean, I don't want to say I laugh at our community's questions, but once you've kind of done this for a while, you kind of see where the error is. But the question was actually phrased: what revenue level should a business be at in order to stop outsourcing and build their internal team in-house? And I kind of laugh at the revenue part of it. But I think the broader question is, how do you know when it's right for you to either stop being the sole practitioner or for you to outsource and actually start bringing things in-house when it comes to project management or just your agency in general?
Right. So that's actually a pretty common question some of our customers ask us. Like, it's great having you on board, and at some point we want to stop paying you and have the team internally. It makes sense, especially for development, especially if they want to maybe potentially sell their company. They want to have all those resources in house. And the question is, when can we do that? And the answer is whenever you want. I mean, it's completely up to you. Whenever you think there's an ROI or if there's a value in terms of bringing the stuff in house. I think each business is different. There isn't like a specific revenue number. In fact, some of our clients do both. They have their internal teams and they outsource portions of that to our team. I've seen the same thing happens with even marketing. I know a lot of companies that have their own internal, SEO team or marketing agency and so forth, agent marketing team, and they outsource components to other third-party companies and so forth. So you could definitely do a mix of that. You could have internal and external people working on the same project. It works the same way in development. We have a lot of customers that build everything with us, and then we maintained it for a while, and then they're like, you know what, we want to bring out 1 or 2 developers in house, and then we work with them on that. And there's different levels of how that works over time. So I don't think there's any specific revenue level, in my opinion. I think it's not consistent across all businesses in terms of how that works. But I think it could be pretty flexible for any business at any stage with any consultant.
Yeah. Good advice. Yeah. There's so many people that think that, they have to be stuck on some kind of milestone. Like, I have to make X amount of dollars, or I have to be at this particular amount of projects. And they put so much emphasis on, when do I get to this milestone and what that milestone is. And the truth, like you said, is, when is it good for you? It's ultimately up to you. There's more than one way to do it. Just like you said, there's agencies and companies that have internal SEO team, but yet they outsource the link building or the link prospecting, or they outsource the content and auditing. It's the same thing with developers as well. They might get a project in and they've got a developer that codes in a certain language, but they're going to still outsource different parts of that project. So it's definitely good to hear you say that. At what moment did you decide to hire, as far as, maybe, a situation that you encountered? Maybe it was the workload, but at what moment did you decide that it was actually time to hire in your situation?
So I think our first employee was a part-time employee. This is when we were like, I don't know, teenagers in my parents' garage. My brother and I own our company. And we're teenagers in our parents' garage, and we're like, oh, there's a lot of work that our clients want us to get done. So we asked around. One of our friend of a friend was also a programmer, and we're like, yeah, do you want part-time work? And they said yes. So they started working in our garage. I think it was like 3 days a week or something like that.
Yeah.
And then it just grows from there. I mean, as more work comes in and you need more, your clients want more stuff done, you just keep hiring. There's never a sweet spot for any specific company. Some people like to keep it, under 5. Some people like to keep it under 15. Some people like to keep it under 60. Some people want to grow as fast as possible and as many employees as possible because they like the headcount or they have the unlimited work. So it's all about like how much work you have. It's hard for an agency the biggest concern for an agency owner is you don't want to have like big salaries and not having those people working, and because you want to make sure to bill out their hours. So that's always the complicated stuff, is like making sure that you have enough, you're not paying salaries and only utilizing 10% of those salaries. You have to make sure to utilize as much of their time as possible so you can bill out and get things done as quickly as possible and make as much money as possible for your agency and make a profit. Otherwise, you're just spending money on salaries and not, making money on it. And that's always the scary part of having, any agency owner will tell you, when we have slow times, it's scary because you got to keep paying salaries, and you don't want to fire people because you might need them in 2 weeks from now or 2 months from now. You don't know. So I think that's the balancing act that all agencies have to deal with. So cautiously hiring in a way that makes your customers happy. At the same time, that doesn't get you too many gray hairs, I guess, in terms of worrying about
Sure.
payroll and stuff.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Well, I guess with your employees, they obviously use tools, software. What are the tools, software that you use in your company? Now, they don't necessarily have to be marketing or web development specific tools. Maybe it's just project management, or maybe it's as simple as Google Docs. But what kind of tools are you using that you just couldn't live without within your agency?
Yeah, I mean, so we're in a development agency, but I also do a lot of writing about search. In terms of the development side, or just in terms of what I personally use a lot of, is obviously our internal task system and timer system to track what our clients want and how much time it takes us. That all goes back into our billing system, which we use QuickBooks. I still use the QuickBooks desktop version. Eventually, maybe I'll switch to the online version, but it's less capable, I guess. We actually integrated our systems with the QuickBooks API so that all the data could flow directly into QuickBooks, and I could easily do timesheets and so forth. We're big users of Slack, Slack internal communication for our office, as well as at Search Engine Land. We use Slack as well, but also Rusty Brick. Obviously, email. Every business relies on email. I'm not a big WhatsApp user. I don't know how people use WhatsApp for business. I don't get it, but
Yeah.
there are plenty of businesses that do it. Google Calendar. I live and die by my Google Calendar and calendar invites. Monday.com we use for some projects, not all. Obviously, I use Google Docs here and there. We use Git for code versioning and so forth. In terms of our server configuration, we're on AWS for most of our stuff, Amazon Web Services. We use a lot of Cloudflare. I mean, the list goes on and on. I mean, we're using tons and tons of stuff out there. We're mostly a LAMP stack environment, so open source, PHP, Laravel, and then iOS and Android development.
Okay, great. Yeah, definitely good insight. I get a lot of comments where, people are always like just stuck on, there's 5 project management tools. Which one do I use? And should I be using, Perl over PHP? And it's always, kind of funny to hear people ask these questions. And then you talk to somebody like yourself and the other interviews I've done, and people, mention a lot, stuff that is free or open source, or, maybe it's just one particular project management system, or it's an API that they build and connect it to QuickBooks, like you said. So it's definitely good to hear that and let other people hear that as well.
Right, for sure. And you might use some for specific instances and some not for specific instances.
Yeah.
But the lifeblood of my company is based off of using our timer and track and task system. Without that, we wouldn't be able to do any projects, and they're actually integrated now with just our counting. It's integrated with our code repository using Git. Everything is really, really tightly integrated. I forgot to mention on the writing side of Search Engine Land and Search Engine Roundtable, which is where I write about search. I built my own what we call writer budget system. It's called Rusty Budget. Not many other people use it, but I use it to keep track of topics. I use Feedly as for RSS. It used to be Google Reader. Now there's a new system called Feedly because Google Reader is no longer around. On social, I use TweetDeck mostly, and then I use Google News and alerts and so forth. So those are other tools that I might use.
Yeah, I definitely like that you keep bringing up the internal time system, because it's weird. I get so many questions about tools. Nobody talks about the time management and the billing aspect of it, and the billings per hour part of it. And some of our other interviewers brought that up. And I think it's really good that people listening to this know that, you can sit here and talk about X tool versus Y tool, and which one's better and what you should go on. But if you're not properly counting your hours and your time per employee and knowing how to budget that and set that, then everything else, as far as trying to grow your agency, worrying about some other tool, is kind of useless, because you can fret about that, but you're never going to get the billing right, which is at the heart of your business.
That's for sure. I mean, I say that the one thing I will not push off, and I don't push off anything, but the one thing I'm just crazy about is making sure to do the monthly billing. Because if I don't do the monthly billing, forget about a client's pay or not. You have to send out the bills in order to get paid. So if you don't send out your monthly bills and you're not keeping track of those monthly bills properly and tracking the tasks and the timers and showing the clients, I got all this done and this is why you're being billed and here's your timesheet and here's your invoice and make sure to pay it by this date, you can't run your business. It's funny how many people are so bad. Small agency owners are so bad about billing. I don't know. I mean, without that, how are you going to do your payroll and all this and pay consultants and pay whoever? So that's the most important thing, I think, is outside of making sure your customers are happy and so forth and employees are happy, you have to make sure to bill. That's just basic.
All right. Well, that kind of gets me into the next question. So a lot of our listeners, they've got no clients, maybe they've got one or two clients. They're definitely not, busting at the seams with clients. So they wanted to know what has been the best way, maybe in your personal experience, maybe you've seen somewhere else, for people to get new clients when they don't have a lot of money, whether it's a specific tactic or a strategy or a method, or just a platform, what has been the best way that you've seen for somebody to get new clients that either has no income or low income to spend to get those clients?
Right. So for my development agency, the best clients by far that I get are word of mouth, because one customer of ours will talk to a friend or colleague or of theirs and they'll be like, this is a really great company. They're not the cheapest, but they're most professional and they do really great work. And that alone will set the stage for, their expectations before they even call you. So they know that information. That's pretty cool. In terms of we ran a SaaS product. A lot of that also was mostly word of mouth. It was a very limited, segmented product that was in a specific type of industry. And initially, we ranked for everything related to those keywords, but people didn't really search for those keywords, whatever the product name would be or the solution would be. So it was very limited in that sense. So people searched for it, they found us, great. And we did some retargeting for a month or so after they went to the website. The ads would follow them around. We did some conferences and so forth. It got our name out there for the product itself. I think for SaaS products and for scaling at that level, whereas agency work is more hands-on. It requires billable hours and so forth, where you're trying to build a SaaS business or selling a product per se, you got to get your name out there in a much bigger way. So the lower the price point, you got to do more mass marketing. On the higher price point, maybe it's easier just to do word of mouth stuff and find the right clients that way. So I think it's different for each business, but I think agency work is probably, at least if you are doing really high-end agency work with high-end pricing, word of mouth is probably the best. Outside of that, I know there are some agencies that do have thousands and thousands of clients, and they do a lot of advertising on Google ads and LinkedIn ads and Facebook ads and so forth. But for me, I haven't really done any of that. It's mostly word of mouth.
Yeah. And that's good to hear, because I think a lot of listeners get really stuck on that they're missing this magic bullet, they're missing this secret LinkedIn strategy, or if they just put more attention into cold emails with a secret word in it that gets past the promotions tab in Gmail, that a lot of them miss just doing great work, excellent work, and talking to your customers and making sure that they're happy, that they'll give you word of mouth and that your reputation will spread. So I think a lot of them miss that because they think that there's some other magic bullet, basically. So it's good to hear that from you, Barry. So this next question, I know can be a little tricky. So now we're getting kind of past the agency stuff and into more personal questions that would be kind of non-agency. If you could take everything that you know now, but you had to start all over, say you had to start from scratch, but you got to keep your experience and your skills, what would your first 90 days look like if you had to start all over today with everything that still in your brain, but you had to start over? What do you think your first 90 days would look like?
That's a really hard question, mostly because I started this when I was a teenager. So it was a great time to start. No real expenses, working out of your parents' garage. I wouldn't have changed anything. It was a great learning experience. I've done some, everybody's regrets certain things they've done here and there. I remember having call waiting back in the day, and you press it and it would flash over to the next caller and another client would call. But then I thought I switched over, and then I was talking to the wrong customer and saying inappropriate things, and so forth, and that kind of got me in trouble. But everybody has their stupid things where they've done stupid things because of whatever it might be. But in terms of overall scope of stuff, I wouldn't change anything. I'm really fortunate and very lucky for how things have gone over the years. And I don't honestly remember. It was so organic the way the company grew. I wouldn't have changed anything. It's just I was very lucky to start my company out of my parents' garage or so as a teenager.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good to hear. If you don't mind me asking me, what year was that when you were a teenager? Not to get into your age or anything, but I'm just kind of curious,
Yeah,
how
no, I
long
mean,
it's been.
I have a Wikipedia page, so it says how old I am. I turned 41 this year.
Oh,
I
okay.
started the business. Unofficially started the business in 1994 in high school when we were 14,
Oh,
and we had clients then, usually small local shops there, and then we got some larger clients over the years. And in college, we got some bigger clients, and I went to university. Baruch College was a city university in New York City. I used to
yeah.
literally run from class to client, class to client, class to client.
Oh,
So it
wow.
worked out pretty well. It was very good stuff. And again, I wouldn't change anything.
Sure.
I don't
Yeah,
know if you would, but
yeah, just to put it out there for fairness, I'm 43, so we're not that far in age difference. And yeah, me and you got our start about the same time. I started in 96. So yeah, I definitely remember way back when doing that stuff. All right, well, this one's a little tricky. There's two questions that are kind of similar. I'll ask the second one a little bit later. But the first one is, if you only had 30 minutes each day, what would you do? And essentially this question is, you're doing the same thing that you're doing right now. You've got the same job title, the same everything, nothing's changed, but for whatever reason, you've got 30 minutes a day now to run your business. What would you do in those 30 minutes each day?
honestly, I think that sounds scary and horrible. But if I only had 30 minutes, I had to divvy up what I was doing. Where would I spend most of my time? So I would do very quick employee status meetings, which I currently do now, but I'll probably make it quicker and more to the point, not make it have as many laughs and fun on the call. Same thing with client status meetings. We don't do them every day, but with different clients, we do them throughout the week. But I love writing about search, so I'd probably spend most of my time doing what I love, and that's writing about search. Um, Not that it's necessarily like my bread, or where I earn my money and so forth. I do make
Sure.
some money on it, but most of my money comes from my consulting and my agency. So I probably spend most of my time writing because I like it. And outside of that, I do very quick meetings with employees and customers.
All right. Yeah, I've had similar answers to that kind of similar to your, doing the employee meetings, where it was, trying to talk to VAs and outsource people. It's basically the same thing, trying to manage people to do the work and making sure that they have no roadblocks. And then I did like yours as far as, writing as well. So I do think that's important. Um, what problems keep you up at night? Now, this necessarily doesn't have to be like personal problems, but it's just kind of like as a business owner, if there are any problems. If there's not, then that's great too. But like, is there anything that you're always going to bed thinking about or worrying about when it comes to your business?
Thank God, no, thank God there's nothing keeping me up at night. There have been times where obviously things have come up and then, you don't sleep well. I'm sure every business owner, I think every person in the world probably has had that. But I mean, overall, if what would keep me up at night, making sure employees are happy. If I know somebody's not happy, that would be upsetting, and I'd be up all night thinking about that. If a client's not happy, that might upset me. I don't think things would necessarily keep me up all night. And I know people who have money issues, that's one of the biggest stresses people have. And thank God that, I will say,
Yeah,
money has not been a huge issue for us, thankfully. So I want to knock on wood or whatever you want to say, but I've been very, very fortunate. So nothing's really keeping me up at night. And I'm happy to say so. But at the same time, things could change in a minute. So who knows?
Oh yeah. Yeah, it's really good to hear that, while it's not keeping you up at night, you did mention, that it would if you had an unhappy employee potentially. I've had, it's nice and surprising to hear that so many business owners have actually said the same thing. Is, they've mentioned, keeping their talent happy, making sure that employees are where they should be and comfortable, whether that was within their job or with the clients that they're helping. I definitely know that when I started out, I lost a lot of nights worrying about cash flow when I first started out, but that was so many years ago, that I'm kind of in the same spot that now I'm glad I don't have to worry about that. But it's definitely something that I know a lot of other people I've talked about when it comes to employees, and it's definitely good to hear that. I guess this next question, this is one that I've seen trip up a few people. It's basically, what do you feel has been the biggest change in SEO over the last 3 years? And also, where do you see it heading for the next 3 years?
Right. So I track SEO at a higher level closer than most people. So that's a
Yeah.
good thing. I would say over the past 3 or so years, the biggest changes have, at least in the SEO aspect side of things, not necessarily general SEM, but more SEO. It's probably these core quality related algorithm updates that Google has released over the years. I think it has impacted SEO in a very, very big way for how SEO is done pre-Penguin days, pre-Panda days, like in early
Yeah.
2010 or so. So I think that was probably the biggest changes you see, and you see that happening with every core update where Google, it's getting harder and harder to build, kind of like fake quality content sites and rank well for that stuff anymore. Easy content, easy SEO is simply just not working anymore. There are probably some exceptions to that rule, and that's going to close up over the years. So I
Yeah.
think ranking is going to continue over the next few years to get harder and harder in Google. Not just because Google's making their algorithms are getting better, but also because there's competition. There's more competition getting into everybody's space every single day. It's very, that's one thing that's happening. The other thing is that Google has knowledge panels that are often competing with your own content, feature snippets and stuff like that. So that stuff happens as well. And then there's also paid search, which is dominating the organic stuff as well, where you could easily get Google ads to show above anything on the organic side. And that's always been an issue, but it's becoming more and more of an issue as Google adds more and more paid results, knowledge panels, feature snippets, local, and so forth above the organic stuff. So I think overall, you're going to see that trend continue. Things are going to continue to get harder in the sake of quality in the search results, that Google wants to make things harder and harder because they want to highlight the most authoritative and most trustworthy websites, especially in the health area, but also well beyond that. You see it's moving into gaming and moving into all these types of industries where trust, or the EAT concept of expertise, authoritativeness, and trustworthiness is kind of flowing into beyond the YMYL, your money, your life area, where it's finance and health, but also flowing into every single sector, as it shows to be actually something that's working very well for Google quality.
Yeah, and that's unfortunately some of the sad news for a lot of people is, it's definitely getting harder, and it's not getting easier. It's definitely an improvement, but I think a lot of people are going to be disappointed if they thought there was going to be a magic bullet. So that's definitely good to hear. Now, this next question, this is kind of that similar to the 30-minute a day one. It is slightly different. And essentially the question is, how would you scale a business if you only had to work part-time, say maybe 20 hours a week? And I think that the way that this is framed is, this is somebody that maybe works a full-time job already. Their spouse works also. Then they come home and they've got a house to maintain and kids. And they've only got 20 hours maybe to help scale their business. What advice would you give that person if they're part-time, they're limited, they're definitely not starting over, but they're just limited on time and what they can do to help scale their business?
I think that's a hard question. I think anybody who really wants their business to be super successful has to be all in.
Yeah, exactly.
Really has to be all in. There was a time like my wife was, on a bed rest when she was, pregnant. And I was literally, taking care of two other kids at night. And also I had scheduled like demonstrations for one of my SaaS products. I remember like holding one of the kids, doing this like without like, it's just, you got to juggle it and you got to make it happen. And if you really want to succeed, sadly, you just got to put the time in. I don't think you could, there are people like, you make enough money and you have enough people under you and and you can throw money at it sometimes. Sometimes it would actually go ahead and, you can make it work with the money, but I don't think it's always the case. Like, I think, um, you could scale. I mean, you could try to scale things and you could do that with money. But in general, I think you have to really gross yourself in that business to be successful. But I mean, there are ways to find patterns in a certain business. But I think you really need to experience those steps, those workflow steps in order to say, all right, these are the workflows. I've done it myself. This is how I could go ahead and either hire people to work under me to scale it. This is either how I could build technology to kind of automate and scale some of those processes, like with task management or monthly billing or reporting tasks. You could automate a lot of that type of stuff. And that's what we're kind of like a same-ish plug. That's kind of what Rusty Brick specializes in, saying, these are the workflows you're doing in your company. This is how you could take maybe 2 man hours that you have and reduce that to a half a man hour, and not necessarily fire that person, but maybe put them in some other task in the company. So it's all about doing more with less. Although any business owner that has more time will put more time into other areas of the business. They just sleep, they breathe, sleep, eat, whatever, their business. And
Yeah.
that's what I kind of think you have to do.
Yeah. Yeah. And I definitely agree. It's definitely a tricky question because, one part of it is me personally, when I first got it, I was like, I don't know if it's really possible, to scale big, on such a limited amount of hours. There's probably several small things that you can layer in. But yeah, I think you have to be in it, full 100% engrossed in it. Cause I know when I was starting out, this was past the 90s, but there was a time where I was a new father and still kind of struggling just a little bit. And I remember I had twins and I had to carry both my twins to work for a week. And they were only like 4 or 5 months old. And it was a struggle just to get out of the van with both of them at the same time and go up the steps to my office, let alone do everything else, like be on phone calls while they were crying and need their diapers changed and all that stuff. But yeah, you've got to be fully 100% in it. So I definitely do agree there. And then there are some small things that you can do too. Now I know you're probably, really busy, but how do you meet other people, in particular, maybe influential people? If you take apart or remove trade shows and networking events, which have been kind of hard to do for some people, at least face to face, for the last year and a half, how are you meeting people when it comes to people that maybe are influential or people that you want to network with?
So I'm not a big networker. And thankfully, because of my writing, I have, I think, over 150,000 Twitter followers. I'm pretty well followed on the internet. So in my little niche, I'm kind of pretty well known in the search world, I guess, and through my social media connections and so forth. And the way to get there is just share a lot of stuff. Like, I write a lot. I write probably from almost 10 new items per day on on search topics, and I share it on Facebook, social, Twitter, and LinkedIn, and so forth. Conferences definitely help. I run conferences as well. So XMX, I'm very, very part of the XMX conferences, and so forth. So I'm a kind of a bad person to ask that because I don't necessarily need to meet influential people. I've met tons of influential people over the years, just through what I do, and I don't necessarily try to do it. I mean, I'm not looking for it, and so forth. So I don't know if that's a great question. I mean, that I can answer or give any tips on it. If you want to become influential and just become an expert, in your easier said than done, become an expert, share a tremendous amount of stuff, and so forth. And over time, you might become an expert and be cited. And I've written up in the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, this and that. So Those things happen over time, but you got to put yourself into it. So I'm kind of like, I am influential in my specific small area of the search marketing world. It's funny because my wife came to one or two conferences in the past, and she's shocked. Like, I'm a big nerd at home, and she's like, "Why are all these people coming over and talking to you?" I'm like, "I don't
Yeah,
know. It's just this little world. People tend to talk to me."
sure.
I'm no Kim Kardashian, but in search, people like to talk to me.
Yeah, yeah, I think it's a good answer because I think at least one of the takeaways there for me that I would want to stress on for our listeners is that you mentioned that you write a lot. And, quite honestly, I wouldn't have known you, which, I've known of you for a very long time now. I would have never have came across you if you didn't write. Um, I think you're writing, and then there's a unique name there, Rusty Brick. I mean, there's a lot of people that, they're either going with their name, which might be a very common name, like Jason Brown is mine. That's a very common name. But I think your writing is definitely how I found you. Not that I'm influential and you want to meet me, but if you hadn't have wrote and put content out there and kept with it and was steady with it, and it was quality content, then I might have never have known you, or at least came across you. So I definitely think that was a good answer, Barry.
It's funny because there is another Barry Schwartz, not a Rusty Brick, but a Barry Schwartz professor that gave a
Yeah.
Google talk at Google years and years and years ago. And I then, thankfully, at one point gave a smaller Google talk at Google in New York City, much smaller than he did. But at least now I am on the same level in terms of I gave a Google talk. But he's wrote books, and he's a professor, and he's been cited
Sure.
about his books and so forth. So yeah, we all have that thing where people have, Barry Schwartz is not a very, it is a pretty common name. Now, Jason Brown is actually a local SEO guy named Jason Brown. So there's definitely lots of people out there with similar names. Rusty
Yeah.
Brick was definitely unique. We didn't have to make it unique because in 1994 we could have done anything, but it wasn't unique, and it was a .com-ish type of name back then even. So
Sure. Oh yeah. Well, we're at our last question. So this question, and I don't know if this impacts you or not. I know it definitely impacts people that are getting a start, or people who are even successful and maybe they don't admit it up front. But essentially, the question is, how do you avoid getting too complacent or lazy? Maybe you're comfortable, you're okay, you don't necessarily need to do more, maybe specifically financially, or you're kind of at a comfortable level. Um, how do you avoid getting complacent and lazy, or has that even been a problem for you?
It's never been a problem with me. I'm not a lazy person. I get up at 5. I get to work. I have an office that I go to like 15 minutes away from my house. I'm usually in my office by 6:10 a.m. every morning.
Wow.
Um,
Yeah.
I work in my office till about 6 p.m. I go home and then I work more. So I'm not lazy. I've had opportunities to become lazy if I wanted to. Technically, I don't have to work as hard financially. I don't, I had a SaaS product and so forth. So we've done things where financially I don't have to worry about it. But I think the trick is to be consistent, be very, very consistent, have a routine. So make sure to stick to that routine. So maybe, every morning you check emails between this and this time, and then you respond to, maybe you go through your news feeds at this time, or maybe you go through the daily what's in the queue for my employees at this time. So you should have a routine that you follow every single morning, Monday through Friday, and make sure to be consistent with that routine. In fact, I have people reach out to me like sometimes, well, why haven't you posted a blog post by this time? Usually that's, are you feeling okay? Is something wrong? So there's some concerns about being too consistent where people might be like, oh, I'm expecting this from you. But I think I think having people being able to expect certain things from you, and you constantly and consistently being able to deliver on that leads to not only people trusting you and having faith in you and relying on you, but also for you to be able to have this routine that you can kind of stick with. I think also never taking anything for granted, knowing like one day, maybe you could get sued or you could get hit by a plane while you're, driving the highway. And crazy thing, but don't
Sure.
take anything for consistent. And what you might have today, you might not have tomorrow. So just, work your hardest and put your effort into it. And, generally lazy people and don't really get what they're looking for. It could happen. People get lucky.
Oh
But
yeah.
I think there's a lot of stuff around, really putting your effort into it and making sure you do it in a very consistent manner makes a big difference.
Yeah, I think a lot of people downplay having a routine and being consistent. Again, they're looking for a magic bullet, like, oh, I've got to have a dream board that I look at with my yacht and my McLaren on it, and that's going to keep me, from being lazy. And people, I think, overlook the routine and the consistency, and maybe even a little bit of, having other people depend on you. Because I know personally, which I've never really talked about this, so this will be the first time on this particular video that I actually mentioned this. But yeah, I mean, I fell into a trap where when I was 30 years old, I had already done good for myself, and I worked very hard to get there, and I wasn't lazy. I felt like at this particular point in my life that I had a lot of people saying, hey, just relax, go into retirement, you deserve this, like, just take a break. And you hear some of that too, like in society, like within movies and so forth. And at one point I fell into the trap, like, hey, I deserve to take some time off now. And I took off for almost 3 years. And I tell you that the first month was really great. And then after that first 30 days, the rest of the 3 years were horrible. Like, I was always trying to stay away from the computer, but I always had these things going on in my head, like, hey, I could build this, or I could do this service, or what if I went out and started this business? And I really lost the whole concept of having a routine. Because in retirement, you think of this older person, they really don't have a routine unless maybe they go fishing every day or something. But I lost the routine, and I lost the consistency, and it just made me miserable. And what really kind of got me back out of that was not only my misery, but I started thinking about it. I've got people that depend on me, whether it was my family or whether it was prior employees, to get back into that. And when I got back into it, I had to have that routine and I had to have that consistency. It wasn't anything to do with a dream board or setting down these unrealistic goals for myself. It was really getting in and doing the work and being consistent and having a routine. So I definitely, agree with you, and thanks for that answer.
Yeah, I mean, people looking for get rich quick things. There's no such thing really. I
Yeah.
mean, and then people saying you deserve this, or somebody saying that to themselves, I deserve this. I hate. I'll probably get in trouble for saying this, but I hate that.
Sure.
I work my butt off and stuff like that, but I still don't think I deserve anything that I have. So
Yeah.
maybe that's why I keep doing what I do. But yeah, I read people who like sold their businesses at young ages and so forth, and a good percentage of them, from what I hear, go into some type of depression and stuff like that, because now
Yeah.
what. So yeah, thanks for sharing that. I'm not saying you went depression or anything like that, but it seemed like you just wanted to get back into that routine of running a business. So yeah,
Oh yeah.
thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. It was definitely something that I kept coming back to, and I would have all these crazy ideas, and then I was miserable, because I wasn't doing that. And I thought, hey, I just need to lay around the house all day and then go to the beach and go do whatever I want unstructured. And that unstructured lifestyle, really damaged, I think, part of it. So I definitely had to get back in. Um, but yeah, we're at the end now. So I want to give you some time to let people know how to reach you, and anything else that you want to talk about as far as your company, and how these people can reach out to you if they want to talk to you.
Yeah, so if you want to find out about my company, it's rustybrick.com. We don't build buildings or sell bricks. We build software. And some people call us saying, can I buy some bricks from you? We don't. So rustybrick.com. We do web and mobile development, mostly software applications for companies. In terms of following the search stuff, I write at Search Engine Land and Search Engine Roundtable. Very, very active on Twitter. My username is at Rusty Brick. Have a YouTube channel, also Rusty Brick. Well, I publish a weekly video of what's going on in search, as well as a vlog kind of video on Mondays and a Friday video on recapping stuff. So take a look at that. And that's it. Check us out at rustybrick.com and follow us.
All right, great. Well, thanks, Barry. I definitely want to say thank you for taking your time and sharing this information. It's been great. And that's it. Hey, you just watched another awesome interview about how to level up your digital marketing business. Hi, my name is Jason Brown, and I am the inventor of SERP tracking and the co-founder of SERPWoo. And today I want to offer you a 20% bonus if you sign up for a paid SERPWoo plan today. It's instant. There's no code that you need to have, and there's no special link. Sign up today, get that 20% bonus. I started SERPWoo almost a decade ago to help me have an advantage against other SEO professionals to find out what really was working on the first page of Google to rank my specific niche and my specific keywords in my industry. I threw out all the garbage about the vanilla SEO advice to find out what specifically worked in niches that I was building. And SERPWoo has grown in that decade to help 20,000 other digital marketers and companies and agencies to do the same. And if you want to get the same advantage of how to outrank your competitors within your specific industry and not just vanilla garbage SEO advice, take advantage of our 20% offer today by signing up for a paid plan with SERPWoo. Thanks.